Greetings and salutations. And Merry Christmas. Let me know in the chat if you can hear and see me. Things are looking good. Hello, Emily. Hello, Joanne. Hello, Anna. Hey, Jeremy. Thank you for joining us as long as you can stick with us. Greg Jackman. Thank you, sir. Kathy B. Terry Smith and Christy Davila are here. Angelica Bolschweiler. Angelica, are you and Fred watching from Big Bear? I'm, as you'll put together by the red fireplace, I'm in Los Angeles. Kelsey Blaine Gibson is here. Did I say hi to Melissa Catano? I'm losing track now. Susan Kuhn, hello. Christina. Hello, darling Christina. My mom, Pam, is here. Hi, Mom. All right. Scrolling. Ah, good. Nick Davila is joining us in a few minutes after he makes Christy some tea. That's very sweet. Wonderful. Okay, looks like people can hear and see. That is good. Ruth Sanchez, hello. I hope San Francisco was awesome this weekend. It looks from every social media indication that it was a hit. Some very hot, very full tea. So I thought I would begin this evening with a poem. It's just something I found in my files from last Christmas, evidently. I only barely remember writing this. I just kind of found it, I don't know, a few days ago. And, hi, Dari. Poem. This opening poem is called Wolfgang's Night Before Christmas. God, it's already getting to me. I haven't even done a first line yet, and it's already killing me. Well, thank you, Ruth. It's good to be missed. I wish I could have been there. This poem is called Wolfgang's Night Before Christmas. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. And the mice were not stirring, but went out to play, thinking the beast cat had gone away. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that slow squirrels soon would be there. The kittens were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of small birds danced in their heads. And Wolfgang with catnip and me with nightcap had just settled ourselves for a long winter's nap, when out on the deck there arose such a clatter, he sprang from the bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window he flew like a flash, He shredded the curtains and threw up with a small splash. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave a luster to night creatures to be caught below. So, when moths are all eaten, enjoy predators' reign, and sleep with a full tummy atop the food chain. Hello, Paul. Glad you can join us. Hello, Craig Jackman, if I didn't say hello to Craig. I wanted to say quite specifically thank you very much to Miss Emily Thatcher. She gave me a very, very sweet Christmas present. Emily procured a picture of Wolfgang from my mom and had it painted onto a disc of wood, kind of like my necklaces. It's a Christmas tree ornament, basically. And I've got it in the next room with some of his favorite toys and his bed. It's sort of a very sweet little altar. So, thank you, Emily. That was a very sweet gesture. It was a lovely present. Thank you. Paul, love you too, man. Thank you. All right. So, as I mentioned last week, Charles Dickens called this story A Christmas Carol because he wanted the story to be repeated and shared to bring people together, just like singing Christmas carols. And these are traditionally an activity that are done with families, that bring families together and give families things to do together. And as a result, instead of dividing the book up into chapters, he divided up into staves, because the stave is, well, it's a musical term, just like a staff in music. So, this is stave 3, 4, and 5. I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us for part 2 of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Awakening in the middle of a prodigiously tough snore and sitting up in bed to get his thoughts together, Scrooge had no occasion to be told that the bell was again upon the stroke of 1. He felt that he was restored to consciousness in the nick of time for the especial purpose of holding a conference with the second messenger dispatched to him through Jacob Marley's intervention. But, finding that he turned uncomfortably cold when he began to wonder which of his curtains this new specter would draw back, he put them all aside with his own hands and, lying down again, established a sharp lookout all around the bed. For he wished to challenge the spirit on the moment of its appearance and did not wish to be taken by surprise. Now, being prepared for almost anything, he was not by any means prepared for nothing. Consequently, when the bell struck 1 and no shape appeared, he was taken with a violent fit of trembling. But as he lay upon his bed, the very core and center of a blaze of ruddy light, streamed into his room when the clock proclaimed the hour. This, being the only light, was more alarming than a dozen ghosts, and he was powerless to make out what he meant. At last, however, he began to think that the source and secret of this ghostly light might be in the adjoining room, from whence, on further tracing it, it seemed to shine. This idea taking full possession of his mind, he got up softly and shuffled in his slippers to the door. It was, of course, his own room. There was no doubt about that. But it had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceiling were so hung with living green that it looked like a perfect grove, and bright, gleaming berries glistened from every part. The crisp leaves of holly, mistletoe, and ivy reflected the light as if so many little mirrors had been scattered there, and a mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney, such that dull petrification of a hearth had never known in Scrooge's time. Heaped up on the floor to form a kind of throne were turkeys, geese, game, poultry, great joints of meat, long wreaths of sausages, mince pies, plum puddings, barrels of oysters, red-hot chestnuts, cherry-cheeked apples, juicy oranges, luscious pears, immense cakes, and seething bowls of punch that made the chamber dim with their delicious steam. In easy state upon this couch, there sat a jolly giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch in a shape not unlike Plenty's horn, and he held it up, high up, to shed its light on Scrooge as he came peeping round the door. "Come in! Come in and know me better, man. I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me." The ghost was clothed in one simple, deep green robe, bordered with white fur. This garment hung so loosely on the figure that its capacious breast was bare. Its feet, observable beneath the ample folds of the government, were also bare. And on its head, it wore no other covering than a holly wreath, set here and there with shining icicles. Its dark brown curls were long and free as its genial face, its sparkling eye, its open hand, its unconstrained demeanor, and its joyful air. Girded round its middle was an antique scabbard, but no sword was in it, and the ancient sheath was eaten up with rust. "You have never seen the like of me before."
"Never."
"Have you never walked forth with the other members of my family?"
I don't think I have. I'm afraid I have not. Have you had many brothers, Spirit?"
"More than 1,800.
Tremendous family to provide for.
The ghost of Christmas present rose. "Touch my robe." Scrooge did as he told and held it fast. All vanished instantly. So did the room, the fire, the ruddy glow, the hour of night, and they stood in the city streets on Christmas morning. The sky was gloomy, and the shortest streets were choked up with a dingy mist, half-thawed, half-frozen, whose heavier particles descended in a shower of soot, as if all the chimneys in Great Britain had by one consent caught fire. There was nothing very cheerful in the climate or the town, and yet there was an air of cheerfulness all about. The steeples called good people to church and chapel, and away they came, flocking through the streets in their best clothes and with their gayest faces. Scrooge and the ghost went on, invisible, into the suburbs of the town and straight to Scrooge's clerk house. Mrs. Cratchit was dressed out, but poorly, in a twice-turned gown, but brave in ribbons, which are cheap and make a goodly show for sixpence. She laid the tablecloth, assisted by Belinda Cratchit, second of her daughters, also brave in ribbons, while Master Peter Cratchit plunged a fork into the saucepan of potatoes while getting the corners of his monstrous shirt collar into his mouth. And now, two smaller Cratchits, boy and girl, came running in, screaming that outside the baker's they had smelt the goose and known it for their own. Basking in luxurious thoughts of sage and onion, these young Cratchits danced about the table and exalted Master Peter Cratchit to the skies while he blew the fire until the slow potatoes, bubbling up, knocked loudly at the saucepan lid to be let out and peeled.
What was ever got your precious father then? And your brother, Tiny Tim? And our Martha? What is late our last Christmas Day by half an hour? Oh, here's Mother. Here's Martha, Mother. There's such a goose, Martha. Why, bless your heart alive, my dear. How late you are. Well, never mind, so long as you're here. Sit ye down before the fire, my dear. Have a warm. Bless ye, Martha.
Mrs. Cratchit kissed her daughter a dozen times and took off the shawl and bonnet for her with officious zeal.
Ah, there's father coming. Hide, Martha, hide.
So Martha hid herself, and in came Bob Cratchit with at least 3 feet of comforter, exclusive of the fringe, hanging down before him, and his threadbare clothes darned up and brushed to look seasonable, and Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. Alas, for Tiny Tim, he bore a little crutch. Why, where's our Martha?
Oh, not coming.
Not coming? No, not coming upon Christmas Day? Martha didn't like to see him disappointed, even if it were only in joke. So she came out prematurely from behind the closet door and ran into his arms, while 2 young Cratchits hustled Tiny Tim and bore him off into the wash-house that he might hear the pudding singing in the copper.
And how did little Tim behave?
Oh, he was good as gold.
And better. Somehow he gets thoughtful, sitting by himself so much, and he thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me, coming home, that he hoped the people saw him in the church because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see. He's growing strong and hearty.
Tim's crutch was heard upon the floor, but back he came before another word was spoken, escorted by his brother and sister to his stool beside the fire. Bob turned up his cuffs and compounded some hot mixture in a jug with gin and lemons, stirred it round and put it on the hob to simmer. Master Peter and the 2 ubiquitous young Cratchits went to fetch the goose, and they soon returned in a high procession. Such a bustle ensued that you might have thought the goose the rarest of all birds, a feathered phenomenon. Mrs. Cratchit made the gravy, ready beforehand in a little saucepan, hissing hot. Master Peter mashed the potatoes with incredible vigor. Miss Belinda sweetened up the applesauce. Martha dusted the hot plates. Bob took Tiny Tim beside him in a tiny corner at the table. The two young Cratchits set chairs for everybody and crammed spoons into their mouths, lest they should shriek for goose before their turn came to be helped. At last, the dishes were set on, and grace was said. All this was succeeded by a breathless pause, as Mrs. Cratchit, looking slowly all along the carving knife, prepared to plunge it in the roasted bird. But when she did, and when the long-expected gush of stuffing issued forth, one murmur of delight rose all around the table, and even Tiny Tim, excited by the two young Cratchits, beat on the table with the handle of his knife and feebly cried, "Hurrah!" There never was such a goose. Bob said he didn't believe there ever was such a goose. Its tenderness and flavor, size and savoriness were the themes of universal admiration. Eked out by applesauce and mashed potatoes, it was a sufficient dinner for the whole family. Indeed, Mrs. Cratchit said with great delight as she surveyed one small bit of a bone upon the dish that they hadn't ate it all at last. Yet, every one had had enough, and the youngest Cratchits in particular were steeped in sage and onion to the eyebrows. But now, Mrs. Cratchit left the room, too nervous to bear witness, to take the pudding up and bring it in. Suppose it should not be done enough. Suppose it should break in turning out. Suppose somebody should have got over the wall of the backyard and stolen it while they were merry with the goose. All sorts of horrors were supposed. Ah, lo! A great deal of steam. The pudding was out of the copper, a smell like a pastry cook's. That was the pudding. In half a minute, Mrs. Cratchit entered, flushed but smiling proudly with the pudding. It looked like a speckled cannonball, so hard and firm, blazing in a bit of ignited brandy and adorned with Christmas holly stuck into the top. Oh, that's a wonderful pudding. Bob Cratchit said that as he regarded it as the greatest success achieved by Mrs. Cratchit since their marriage. Mrs. Cratchit said that now that the weight was off of her mind, she would confess she had her doubts about the quantity of flour. Everybody had something to say about it, but nobody said or thought it was at all a small pudding for a large family. It would have been flat heresy to do so. Any Cratchit would have blushed to hint at such a thing. At last, the dinner was all done. The cloth was cleared, the hearth swept, and the fire made up. The compound in the jug being tasted and considered perfect. Apples and oranges were put upon the table, and a shovel full of chestnuts on the fire. Then all the Cratchit family drew round the hearth, and at Bob Cratchit's elbow stood the family display of glass. 2 tumblers and a custard cup without a handle. However, these held the hot stuff from the jug as well as golden goblets would have done. And Bob served it out with beaming looks while the chestnuts on the fire sputtered and cracked noisily. Then Bob proposed. "A Merry Christmas to all, my dears. God bless us." Tiny Tim added, "God bless us, everyone." Tim sat very close to his father's side upon his little stool. Bob held Tim's withered little hand in his. Scrooge pondered. Spirit, tell me if Tiny Tim will live.
I see a vacant seat in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die. None other of my race will find him here. What then? If he be like to die, he had better do it and decrease the surplus population.
Scrooge hung his head to hear his own words quoted by the Spirit.
Man, if man you be in heart, forbear that wicked can't until you have discovered what the surplus is and where it is. Will you decide what men shall live, what men shall die? It may be that in the sight of heaven you are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child.
Scrooge bent before the ghost's rebuke, and, trembling, cast his eyes upon the ground. But he raised them speedily on hearing his own name spoken from Bob Cratchit. Mr. Scrooge, I'll toast to Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast. Mrs. Cratchit rejoined, Founder of the feast, indeed. I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I'd hope he'd have a good appetite for it. My dear, the children, it's Christmas Day. It should be Christmas Day, I'm sure, on which one drinks the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know who he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you do, poor fellow. My dear, it's Christmas Day. I'll drink his health for your sake and for the day's, not for his. Long life to him, a Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year. He'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt. The children drank the toast after her. It was the first of their proceedings, which had no heartiness in it. Tiny Tim drank it last of all, but didn't care tuppence for it. Scrooge was the ogre of the family. The mention of his name cast a dark shadow on the party, and this was not dispelled for a full 5 minutes. But after it had passed away, they were 10 times merrier than before, just from the mere relief of Scrooge the Baleful being done with. The chestnuts in the jug went round and round, and by they had a song from Tiny Tim, who sang it very well indeed. There was nothing of high mark in this. They were not a handsome family. They were not well dressed. Their shoes were far from being waterproof. Their clothes were scanty. But they were happy, grateful, pleased with one another, and contented with the time. And when they faded and looked happier yet in the bright sprinklings of the Spirit's torch at parting, Scrooge had his eye upon them, and especially on Tiny Tim, until the last. By this time, it was getting dark and snowing pretty heavily. As Scrooge and the Spirit went along the streets, the brightness of the roaring fires in kitchens, parlors, and all sorts of rooms was wonderful. Blessings over all, how the ghost exulted, how it puffed out its huge chest and opened its capacious palm and floated on, Such an outpouring from its generous hand was bestowed a bright mirth on everything within its reach. Again, the ghost sped on. It was a great surprise to Scrooge to hear a hearty laugh. It was a much greater surprise to Scrooge to recognize it as his own nephew's, and to find his own self in a bright, dry, gleaming room with the spirit standing and smiling by his side, looking at that same nephew with approving affability.
Right. He said that Christmas was a humbug. As I live, he believed it too.
His kindly wife added,
More shame for him, Fred. He's a comical old fellow, and that's the truth. My uncle is not so pleasant as I think he might be. However, his offenses carry their own punishment, and I'm sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers by his ill whims? Himself, always. He takes it into his head to dislike us, and he won't come and dine with us. What's the consequence? Well, he loses some pleasant moments which could do him no harm. I'm sure he loses us as more pleasant companions than he can find all alone with no company but his own thoughts, being either in his mouldy old office or his dusty old chambers. I mean to give him the same chance every year, whether he likes it or not. And I think I shook him yesterday. It was the company's turn to laugh now at the notion of shaking Scrooge. But Fred, being thoroughly good-natured and not much caring what they laughed at, he encouraged them in their merriment. But the scene passed. Scrooge and the spirit were again on their travels. Much they saw, and far they went, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. The spirit stood beside sick beds, and they felt cheerful, beside visitors on foreign lands, and they felt close to home, beside struggling men, and they felt patient in their greater hope, by poverty, and they felt rich, in almshouse, hospital, in jail, in misery's every refuge, where vain man in his little brief authority had not made fast the door to bar the spirit out, the spirit left his blessing and taught Scrooge his precepts. It was a long night, if it were only a night. But Scrooge had his doubts of this, because the Christmas holidays appeared to be condensed into that space of time they passed together. It was strange, too, that while Scrooge remained unaltered in his own outward form, the ghost grew visibly older, clearly older. Scrooge had observed this change, but never spoke of it until they left a children's party. And looking at the spirit as they stood together in an open place, Scrooge noticed that its hair was gray. Are spirits' lives so short?
My life upon this globe is very brief. It ends tonight at midnight. Hark, the time is drawing near.
The chimes were ringing the 11:15 at that moment.
Spirit, forgive me if I'm not justified in what I ask, but I see something strange and not belonging to yourself protruding from your skirts. Is it a foot or a claw?
It might be a claw, for so little flesh there is upon it. Look here.
From the folds of its robe, it brought two children, wretched, abject, frightful, hideous, miserable. They knelt down at the spirit's feet and clung upon the outside of its garments.
Oh, man, look here. Look.
They were a boy and a girl. Meager, ragged, scowling, but also with humility. Where graceful youth should have filled their features out and touched them with its freshest tints, a hand like that of age had pinched and twisted them and pulled them into shreds. Where angels might have sat enthroned, devils lurked and glared out, menacing. No change, no degradation, no perversion of humanity in any grade. Through all the mysteries of wonderful creation has monsters half so horrible and dreadful. Scrooge started back, appalled.
Spirit, are they yours?
They are mankind's, and they cling to me. This boy is ignorance. This girl is want. Beware of them both, and all of their degree, but, most of all, beware this boy, for on his brow I see that written which is doom, unless the writing be erased. Deny it, or make it worse. Then bide the end.
Have they no refuge or resource?
Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses?
The bell struck 12. Scrooge looked about him for the ghost and saw it not. As the last stroke ceased to vibrate, he remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes, he beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground towards him. Slowly, gravely, silently. The very air through which the spirit moved seemed to scatter gloom and mystery. It was shrouded in a deep black garment which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible, save one outstretched hand. But for this, it would have been difficult to see its figure in the night and darkness by which it was surrounded. Its mysterious presence filled him with a solemn dread.
Am I in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come?
The spirit answered not, but pointed onward with its hand.
You are about to show me shadows of the things that have not happened, but will happen in the time before us. Is that so, Spirit?
The upper portion of the garment was contracted for an instant in its folds, as if the spirit had inclined its head. That was the only answer it received. But Scrooge was all the worse for this. It filled him with a vague, uncertain horror to know that behind the dusky shroud there were ghostly eyes, intently fixed upon him.
Lead on. Lead on. The night is waning fast, and it is precious time to me. I know. Lead on, Spirit.
They scarcely seemed to enter the city. But there they were, in the heart of it, amongst the merchants, who hurried up and down and chinked the money in their pockets and conversed in groups and looked at their watches, as Scrooge had often seen them do. The spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen Observing that the hand was pointed to them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk.
No, I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead.
Well, right, so when did he die?
Last night, I believe.
So, wait, what was the matter with him? I thought he'd never die.
God knows.
What's he done with his money?
I haven't heard. Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me, that's all I know.
Well, right, it's likely to be a cheap funeral, for upon my life, I don't know of anybody to go to it. Suppose we make up a party and volunteer to go.
Well, I don't mind going if lunch is provided, but
I must be fed if I go. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Speakers and listeners strolled away and mixed with other groups. Scrooge knew the men and looked toward the spirit for an explanation. But the phantom pointed to two other persons meeting.
How are you then? Right. How are you? Well, old Scratch has got his own at last, eh? Aye, so I'm told. Cold, isn't it? Oh, it's seasonable for Christmas time. Right, good morning.
Good morning, then. Not another word. That was their meeting, their conversation, and then their parting. Scrooge was at first inclined to be surprised that the spirit should attach importance to conversations apparently so trivial. He looked about in that very place for his own image, but another man stood in his accustomed corner. And though the clock pointed to his usual time of day for being there, he saw no likeness of himself among the multitudes that poured in through the portico. But now they left the busy scene and went into an obscure part of town where Scrooge had never penetrated before, although he recognized its situation and its bad repute. The ways were foul and narrow, the shop and houses wretched, the people half-naked, drunken, slipshod, ugly. Alleys and archways, like so many cesspools, disgorged their offenses of smell and dirt upon the straggling streets, and the whole quarter reeked with crime, with filth and misery. Deep in this den of infamy, there was a low-browed shop where iron, old rags, bottles, bones, and greasy offal were bought. Within the shop, upon the floor, were piled up heaps of rusty keys, nails, chains, hinges, files, scales, weights, and iron of all kinds. There, sitting in among the wares he dealt in, by a charcoal stove made of old bricks, was a gray-haired rascal, nearly 70 years of age, who smoked his pipe in all the luxury of calm retirement. Scrooge and the phantom came into the presence of this man, just as a woman with a heavy bundle slunk into the shop. But she had scarcely entered when another woman, similarly laden, came in too. And she was closely followed by a man in faded black, who was no less startled by the sight of them than they had been upon the recognition of each other.
Right, so let the charwoman be first, let the laundress be second, and let the undertaker's man be the third. Look here, old Joe, if there's a chance, if we haven't all three met here without meaning it...
Aye, you couldn't have met in a better place. Come into the parlor.
The woman who had already spoken threw her bundle on the floor and sat down in a flaunting manner on a stool, crossing her elbows on her knees and looking at the other two.
What odds, then? What odds, Miss Dilber?
Every person has a right to take care of themselves. He always did. Who's the worse for the loss of a few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose. If he wanted to keep 'em after he was dead. Wicked old screw. Why wasn't he more natural in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd have had somebody to look after him when he was struck with death, instead of lying there gasping out his last, alone, by himself. Open that bundle, old Joe. Let me know the value of it. But the man in faded black, mounting the breach first, produced his plunder. It was not extensive. A seal or two, a pencil case, a pair of sleeve buttons, and a brooch of no great value were all. They were severally examined and appraised by old Joe, who chalked the sums for each upon the wall and added them up into a total. Miss Dilber was next. Sheets and towels, a little wearing apparel, 2 old-fashioned silver teaspoons, a pair of sugar tongs, and a few boots.
I always give too much to the ladies. It's a weakness of mine.
Next was the woman with the bundle on the floor. Joe went down on his knees for the greater convenience of opening it, and having unfastened a great many knots, dragged out a large, heavy roll of some dark stuff. Old Joe had to inquire,
What do you call this? Are these bed curtains? You don't mean to say you took down the bed curtains, rings and all, with him still lying there?
Who's the worse for the loss of a few things like these, eh? Not a dead man, I dare say. Scrooge listened to this dialogue in horror. As they sat grouped about their spoil in the scanty light afforded by the old man's lamp, he viewed them with a detestation and disgust which could have hardly been greater if they had been obscene demons marketing the corpse itself. The scene changed. Scrooge recoiled in terror. He almost touched a bed, a bare, uncurtained bed, on which, beneath a ragged sheet, there lay something covered up. The room was very dark. Too dark to be observed with any accuracy, though Scrooge glanced around it, anxious to know what kind of room it was. A pale light, rising in the outer air, fell straight upon the bed, and on it, plundered and bereft, unwatched, unwept, uncared for, was the body of a man. Scrooge glanced towards the phantom. Its steady hand was pointed to the head. The cover was so carelessly adjusted that the slightest raising of it, the motion of a finger upon Scrooge's part, would have disclosed the face. The dead man lay in the dark and empty house. There was a sound of gnawing rats beneath the hearthstone. What they wanted in the room of death, and why they were so restless and disturbed, Scrooge did not care to think.
Spirit, I understand you. And I would do it if I could.
Still, the ghost pointed with an unmoved finger to the head.
Spirit, I have not the power. If there is any person in the town who feels emotion caused by this man's death, show that person to me. Spirit, I beseech you.
The phantom spread its dark robe before him for a moment, like a wing, and withdrawing it, revealed a room by daylight where a mother and her children were. She was expecting someone, and with anxious eagerness, at length, the long-expected knock was heard. She hurried to the door and met her husband, a man whose face was careworn and depressed, though he was young. There was a remarkable expression in it now, a kind of serious delight, of which he felt ashamed, and which he struggled to repress.
Well, is it good or bad?
It's bad.
We are quite ruined, then.
Not that part. There is hope yet, Caroline.
If he relents, there is. Nothing has past hope as such a miracle has happened.
He's past relenting, all right. He's dead. She was a mild and patient creature, if her face spoke truth, but she was thankful in her soul to hear it. And she said so with clasped hands. She prayed forgiveness the next moment and was sorry. But the first was the emotion of her heart. Look, by the time our debt is transferred, we'll be ready with the money, and we shall sleep with light hearts tonight.
Spirit, let me see some tenderness connected with the death. Or that dark chamber which we left just now will be forever present to me.
The ghost conducted him through several streets familiar to his feet, and they entered poor Bob Cratchit's house and found the mother and the children seated round the fire. Quiet. Very quiet. The formerly noisy little Cratchits were as still as statues in one corner and sat looking up at Peter, who had a book before him. The mother and her daughters were engaged in sewing, but they were all very quiet. Mrs. Cratchit laid her work upon the table and put her hand up to her face. Oh, yes, the colour hurts my eyes. Now, right, that's better now. I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home for the world. He must be near his time, though. Peter commented. Right, but it's past it rather, but I think he's walked a little slower these last few evenings, Mother. I've known him walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder very fast indeed. It was very light to carry. It was no trouble. No trouble indeed. Ah, there's your father at the door. His tea was ready for him on the hob. Then the two young Cratchits got upon his lap, and each child laid a little cheek against his face. Bob was very cheerful with them and spoke pleasantly to all the family. Mrs. Cratchit inquired, So, you went out today then, Robert? Yes, my dear. I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green a place it is. But you'll see it often. I promised him that we would walk there on a Sunday. My little child. My little child. Bob told the family of the extraordinary kindness of Mr. Scrooge's nephew, whom he had scarcely seen but once, and who, meeting him in the street later that day, and seeing that he looked a little down, inquired what had happened to distress him. I am heartily sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit, and heartily sorry for your good wife. If I can be of any service to you in any way, please don't hesitate to come to me. It really seemed as if he'd known our Tiny Tim, and he felt with us. My dears, When we recollect how patient and how mild Tiny Tim was, we shall not quarrel easily among ourselves, nor shall we forget our Tiny Tim in doing it.
Spectre, something informs me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it, but I know not how. Tell me what man that was whom we saw lying dead.
The ghost of Christmas yet to come conveyed him as before until they reached an iron gate, a churchyard. Here, the wretched man whose name he had now to learn lay underneath the ground. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one. Scrooge advanced toward it, trembling. The phantom was exactly as it had been, but Scrooge dreaded that he saw a new meaning in its solemn shape.
Before I draw nearer to that stone to which you point, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of things that will be? Or are they the shadow of things that may be only?
Still, the ghost pointed downward to the grave by which it stood.
Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends, to which, if preserved in, they must lead. But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Say it as thus, with what you show me.
The spirit was immovable as ever. Scrooge crept toward the grave, trembling as he went, and following the finger, read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge.
Am I that man who lay upon the bed? No, spirit, oh no!
The finger pointed from the grave to him and back again.
No, spirit, I'm not the man I was. Why show me this if I am past all hope? Or show me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may wash away the writing on the stone.
And there began an alteration in the phantom's hood and clothing. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. Yeah, and the bedpost was his own. The room was his own. The bed curtains were in place and not torn down.
They're not torn down.
Rings and all, they're here. I am here. The shadows of the things that would have been may be dispelled. They will be. I know they will.
He was laughing and crying in the same breath.
I'm as light as a feather. I'm as merry as a schoolboy. I'm as giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to all the world.
Really, for a man who had been out of practice for so many years, it was a splendid laugh, a most illustrious laugh. The father of a long, long line of brilliant laughs.
I don't know what day of the month it is. I don't know how long I have been among the spirits. I don't know anything.
He was checked in his transports by the churches, ringing out the lustiest peals he had ever heard. Running to the window, he opened it and put out his head. No fog, no mist, clear, bright, jovial, stirring, cold, piping for the blood to dance to, golden sunlight, heavenly sky, sweet, fresh air, merry bells, glorious, oh glorious. Scrooge called downward to a boy in Sunday clothes.
What day is it today, my fine fellow?
Today? Why, it's Christmas Day. It's Christmas Day. I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. They can do anything they like. Of course they can. Of course they can. Hello, my fine fellow. Hello. Do you know the poulterers in the next street but one?
I should hope I do.
An intelligent boy, a remarkable boy. Do you know whether they sold the prized turkey that was hanging up there? The big one.
What? The one as big as me?
Yeah, what a delightful boy. It's a pleasure to talk to him. Yes,
It's hanging there now.
it is. Go and buy it. And tell them to bring it here that I may give them the directions where to take it. Come back with the man and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes and I'll give you half a crown.
The boy was off like a shot.
I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's. He shan't know who sends it.
Scrooge went down to open the street door, ready for the coming of the poulterer's man. As he stood there, waiting his arrival, the knocker caught his eye.
I shall love it as long as I live. I scarcely ever looked at it before. What an honest expression it has in its face. It's a wonderful knocker. Oh, here's the turkey. Hello, how are you? Merry Christmas. Why, it's impossible to carry that to Camden Town. You must have a cab.
The chuckle with which he said this, and the chuckle with which he paid for the turkey, and the chuckle with which he paid for the cab, and the chuckle with which he recompensed the boy were only to be exceeded with the chuckle by which he sat down breathless in his chair again and chuckled until he cried. He dressed himself all in his best, and at last got out into the streets. The people were by this time pouring forth, as he had seen them with the ghost of Christmas present, and walking with his hands behind him. Scrooge regarded every one with a delighted smile. He looked so irresistibly pleasant that 3 or 4 good-humored fellows said, "Right, good morning, sir. Merry Christmas to you." He'd not gone far when, coming on towards him, he beheld the portly gentleman who had walked into his counting-house the day before, and it sent a pang across his heart to think how this old gentleman would look upon him when they met. Scrooge quickened his pace and took the old gentleman by both hands.
My dear sir, how do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. It was very kind of you. A Merry Christmas to you, good sir.
Mr. Scrooge?
Yes, that is my name, and I fear it may not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon, and will you have the goodness...
Here, Scrooge whispered in his ear. Lord bless me. My dear Mr. Scrooge, are you serious?
If you please, and not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Will you do me that favor?
My dear sir, I don't know what to say to such munificent...
Don't say anything at all, please. Come and see me. Will you come and see me?
I will.
Thank you. I'm much obliged to you. I thank you 50 times. Bless you.
In the afternoon, he turned his steps toward his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock. But he made a dash and did it. A housemaid answered the door.
Is your master at home, my dear?
Right, yes, sir.
Well, where is he, my love?
He's in the dining room, sir, along with a mistress. I'll show you upstairs, if you please.
Thank you. He knows me. I'll go in here, my dear.
He walked in and came face to face with his nephew, Fred.
Why, bless my soul, who's that? It's I, your Uncle Scrooge. I have come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?
It is a mercy Fred didn't shake his arm off. Scrooge was at home within 5 minutes. Nothing could be heartier. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful togetherness, wonderful happiness. However, he was early at the office the next morning. Oh,
He was early there. If he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming in late, that was the thing he had set his heart upon. And he did it. Yes, he did. The clock struck 9. No Bob. 1:15. No Bob. He was full 18 minutes and a half behind his time. Scrooge sat with his door wide open that he might see him come into the room. Bob's hat was off before he opened the door. His comforter, too. He was on his stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock. Scrooge, in his accustomed growly voice,
Hello? What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?
I'm very sorry, sir. I'm behind my time.
Yes, you are. Yes, I think you are. Step this way, sir, if you please.
It's only once a year, sir. It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir, and
Now, I'll tell you what, my friend. I am not going to stand for this sort of thing any longer. And therefore, I am about to raise your salary.
Bob trembled and got a little nearer to the ruler. He had a momentary idea of knocking Scrooge down with it, holding him and calling to the people in the court for help in a straitjacket.
A Merry Christmas, Bob! A Merrier Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, that I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary and endeavor to assist your struggling family, and we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a Christmas bowl, Bob. Make up the fires and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit.
Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city ever knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh, and little heeded them, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good, at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the outset. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. Thereafter, it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well. May that be truly said of us, and of all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone. Wow. Oh, man. So I want to reiterate a heartfelt thank you and true gratitude for everyone who has tuned in this evening, that we can do this together. I can't press the importance enough
that it was Charles Dickens' wish that this story be a thing that brings people together. As they listen to it, they retell it just like Christmas carols. So thank you very much for keeping this brilliant and kind man's dream alive with me, with us, with this community. Oh, let's take a look over in the chat. Hey, Bosk. Good to see you, man. I see Gavin Stegall is here. Yeah. All right, Gavin. Thank you very much for joining us. Well, yeah. I'm seeing Paul with a comment. I don't know how he keeps all the accents straight. Yeah, well, it's that's the challenge. Funny, it used to be extremely difficult for me to switch accents in any way, shape, or form. Never mind to keep them straight, but just to switch. Like I think in my probably early 20s, I was really good at copying a particular accent, and it's not that just to give you like a kind of an insight on this. I've heard a couple other character actors say something very similar. Hank Azaria is one of them, where the approach isn't like, it's not that I do an accent, and this is almost word for word what Hank Azaria has also said. Hank said, I don't do accents. I do imitations of particular individuals that I have in mind, and it either works or it doesn't work. And yeah, that is very is also very key to switching, particularly in dialogue when you see them, is just having it so ingrained that you're so clear as to who you are impersonating at any given time. Hello, Amanda. Hello, David. Oh, that's very sweet. Ruth Sanchez says, I'm sending this reading as a gift to my good friends and family on Christmas Day. Thank you. Thank you, Ruth Sanchez. That's very sweet. Oh, that's so sweet. Okay, so a couple of parting thoughts. One is the James Webb Space Telescope has been slightly delayed by only 2 days from the last time that we discussed it here on the show. The James Webb Space Telescope is now slated to go up on December the 24th. So I am going to be, really anxiously awaiting what happens on December the 24th, and for about the next 9 days or so afterwards, I'm going to be keeping a very careful track of space news. I wanted to thank Emily Thatcher again for the Christmas present. It's just extremely sweet. Thank you. It's very considerate. Yeah, Christina. It'll be going up on Christmas Eve, so there are a lot of engineers and a lot of people working on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. Of course, if it went up on the 22nd, that probably would have been the case anyway. As always, we've got the tip jar down here in the corner. Feel free to plug something into the Venmos, the PayPals, if you're so inclined. And in the other corner, we're running a bit long this evening, so we'll come back to Ask Hunter Anything next week. Keep those questions coming in. There are some very fascinating, thought-provoking questions that I'm extremely flattered to have been asked. Thank you very much. So, yeah, with that. Oh, I know there's going to be a Paulie's online variety show this coming Thursday. So I'll be doing the Lovecast at the normal time from 6 o'clock to, a little after, like 7. I'll try not to go over. And then afterwards is going to be the Christmas special of Paulie's online variety show. I'll be doing that as well. So I'm just going to set up and just stay set up and go right from one show into the other. And tomorrow, be sure to tune in to see Christina Beelan as the guest on Dancing with Dari tomorrow at 6:30. Thank you, Paul. Oh, Emily Thatcher is going to be doing a song live on Thursday. That's awesome. That is lovely. And let's see, Amanda, are you doing a show this coming Wednesday? Yeah, Amanda's just right now in the chat saying she'll be doing a show on Wednesday indeed. So join us for Amanda's show at 7:30 on Wednesday. I got the time right, yeah? It's always at the same time. You would think I'd be able to remember this. Amanda says, I've got lots of guests and good stuff lined up. Well, excellent. Excellent, Amanda. I will be there. Yes, 7:30. Got the time right. Yeah, I will indeed be there. So, thank you all very much for joining us this evening. God, I love this story. Oh, I just love this story so much. I think I'm going to cut it off there. And, wow, I may just go, I'm so relieved to have so many things that have been building behind me. Not the least of which was I took my statistics final today. And I went into the final with a 98%, so I think I only needed to get a 73% to keep my A, and I'm pretty sure I did. So, yeah, I'm just relieved to be past the testing sorts of things. So, Mom is saying after Hunter's Lovecast is Paulie's show. So, Paul, are you doing an In the Cove tonight? Maybe I won't go for that bike ride after all. All right. Well, in any case, thank you very, very much all for joining us again. I love you all. Good night.